The Hadrian's Wall Gallery here at the Great North Museum Hancock is fantastic, but there are a lot of stones. There are a lot of altars. You could describe the experience as death by stone, but actually there's so much information. There's so many great stories in any single one of those altars. We wanted to do something that would bring those objects to life for the average person who's not a scholar of Roman Britain, and make them really think about actually what they're seeing. Roman Britain in Color is a series of projects, a series of different pieces of research that are attempting to help especially the public understand actually how bright and colorful the ancient world is. We often see stones and remains of buildings, and all we see are the kind of the leached natural colors of stone, but most of those would have been painted in antiquity. And so, Roman Britain in Color is a way to tell that story to people of how the past wasn't just monochrome and black and white. The Roman altars that are in the Great North Museum Hancock come from a number of sites across the entirety of Hadrian's Wall and other Roman sites in the north of Britain. Two of the altars, for example, in the Roman Britain in Color were found in the River Tyne. There's another altar that is found just up the road from Newcastle, Newcastle's west end at Benwell, where we kind of have the only evidence for what appears to be a very local god, the Geordie god as he's known, Antenociticus. We had a series of meetings and we came to the decision, actually, let's do something with the altars because that's one of the best assets that we have here in the museum. And so we discussed all the possible things we could do, and actually that laser projection mapping and animation, it looks really cool. So we thought that would be awesome if we could do that here. We have used actually a whole series of technologies to create this laser mapping. There are traditional technical drawings and museum quality, archive quality photographs. We also had the benefit of using three-dimensional scans that we had taken of the altars some years ago. We can take the information that we have from those really basic drawings and photographs, add it to the three-dimensional models, then add another layer of the animation, the color, the artwork that Novak created, and then pump it out through the projector. So all of a sudden you have this brilliant display in three-dimensional space. Those stone altars are huge. They literally weigh multiple tons. They just look heavy. And actually, all of a sudden, lighting them up, adding color, it brings out some of the artistry and detail that's been carved into these rocks. But it also creates the more realistic impression that these are living objects. These are objects that were part of people's lives and part of people's belief systems. They were fundamental to how people interacted with the supernatural world. The Romans had a rather complex belief system. They believed in many gods. They could worship any number of gods at one time. An altar becomes an object where you would focus your sacrifice, your gift to the god in question. And that could be something like a drink of wine, if you pour a bit of wine on top of the altar. It might also be the sacrifice of an animal that's sacred to the god. So more commonly a chicken, but in large sacrifices it might be a white bull, for example, to the god Jupiter. But there's also a commemoration dedication to Minerva, who's the Roman cognate of Athena, goddess of wisdom, but also strategy and warfare. There is an altar to Neptune, who's the god of kind of freshwater rivers and things, and to Oceanus, the god of oceans. Roman stones, Roman altars, will often hold Latin inscriptions, and that's simply because Latin is the language of the Roman Empire. And what you see with Roman inscriptions is they're using often a series of abbreviations. And that's one of the really quite useful things about Latin. It's a really easy language to abbreviate. So IOM, for example, is short for what we would translate as Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter best and greatest. These are objects that take time to make and skill to make. And so the very commissioning of an altar is also an act of piety. Often the altars we see, they're commissioned by a commanding officer or someone who's wealthy, or it's done on behalf of a whole unit of Roman soldiers or a whole religious group. Altars aren't exclusive to the wealthy or to the powerful. We also have in the museum really small altars that are only this big. And that's the sort of thing that would be a stone that you can lift and carry by yourself. The inscriptions are often much simpler. They're often not as elaborate in terms of sculpture and detail. And those are probably considerably cheaper. There's been a lot of research happening probably in the past 5 to 10 years in looking at the kind of really close microscopic traces of surface that we can find on the stone. And that's revealed very minor, almost microscopic fragments of paint, pigments of paint. Roman paint is, in some cases, not dissimilar from modern paint. However, it's also not the sort of thing you would go and pick up at the hardware store either. Paints tend to be hand mixed. The color is dependent very much on what materials they can use to dye, to add color to the paint. But red is very ubiquitous across the Roman world. You'll see red and white quite frequently, and actually that creates a nice high contrast visually as well. It's quite easy to achieve a red color paint. Some paints, like blue, are actually much harder to achieve and require kind of the grinding down of a rare metal ore in its kind of rock form, or even a mineral or a semi-precious stone. But the Romans, when they did paint, were often quite fond of what we would consider bright and contrasting colors. So what you would see is lots of clashing bright colors, blues and yellows and reds, purples. And so it really kind of draws attention to the work, which might be important, for example, if it's proclaiming the work of an emperor or it's dedicated to a god. I'm really pleased that Roman Britain in color is actually part of the permanent display of the Hadrian's Wall Gallery here at the Great North Museum, Hancock. What's great is that in WallCap and with Lottery's help, it's there for free for the public, for everyone to enjoy. WallCap is short for the Hadrian's Wall Community Archaeology Project, and that is a project that's funded by the National Heritage Lottery Fund. And the project itself is working across the World Heritage Site of Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall has been so important to this region, not just in its Roman history, but in the post-Roman years as well. And so this project is trying to help people understand and appreciate that heritage because it's unique, it's world heritage, and we're very lucky to have it.